Hello, I'm not taking a chance today. This week spring is very much going to be here. Yeah, the sun's shining, it's going to get warm, it's nice. 130th day, I got 50 days to go, 49 after today. I'm counting them down because I'm aware of how far I have to go. Alright, stuff about the last video. If you decide, I'm sorry I didn't hold those cards in the right spot. I'm sorry about it. It's kind of hard to calculate that. But you could only see them so well anyway. If you would like to see those closer, Flemish calendar, 16th century, British Museum, if you add that to your search, that's where they are. I'm very sure you'd be able to see them online very clearly. Kind of a personal story, those postcards, I had them displayed one time all in order and above our couch in our house. And when my daughter was just a little girl, she used to sit on my shoulder. She would stare at these. I wonder if to what extent she would remember that, and to what extent it affected her that she's. And while I'm on that, those are better than photographs to give you a view of what life was like at the time. I mean, I have studied them. I've looked what people are wearing, the tools that they're holding, the way the buildings are roofed, and I already said the way the trees are trimmed. I really like him. But that's behind us. All right, with Henry VIII, why he had all those wives, one after the other. He didn't have them at the same time. He needed a male heir, he figured. His wives would only give him daughters, and at that time they would think, oh, it must be the wife's fault. He finally got a male heir, but he died young. And I should have mentioned the dissolution of the monasteries. When Henry VIII took over the church, he dissolved the monasteries and took their land and their property, as far as I know. I mean, it was devastating to the Catholic Church in England. I did find, it took me a while, because there's so much about Elizabeth and that time. So it took me a while of looking, but on YouTube you can find it. Here's what you need: David Starkey. Elizabeth is the name of his documentary. I think it's 4 hours long. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, part one, From Prison to Palace. That's the part that I would use with the students to show Elizabeth from a little girl up through that really scary time when she was under the care but threatened as well by her guardian. So that's what I would use. You know, it was a little scary to my 13 and 14-year-old kids as they were watching. I didn't show them too much. I would show them up through the point where she almost was executed. The day that she expected she would go and be beheaded. That's usually all I had time for. All right, in the Renaissance. Characteristics, that's the abbreviation. It's going to stand for characteristics of the period. What was it like? It's rebirth. I want to use that term rebirth because Renaissance, there it is, Renaissance. This is birth and that's over again. So it was a rebirth of the classics, and by that I mean Greek and Roman knowledge and art. They started to build domes on top of buildings. I mean, the architecture changed. It was like when the Middle Ages broke loose, off they went. It was, in my mind, it was a very exciting time because so much was new all of a sudden. Humanism is a term that I'm not too good with. I should be. I've never known exactly. Maybe my attitude is so much that of a humanist. You know, humanities. This is Frank's Hum 100, Frank's Humanities 100. Maybe it's so much part of my thinking that I can't think another way, but I should give you that term. Renaissance man I already gave you. It's a term for it, also called polymath. I just learned that yesterday or the day before. I never had seen that word. I knew that in Europe it's called a universal man, or in Switzerland, I talked to some Swiss kids about that, and they seem to know it as a universal man. But anyway, an example, Leon Battista Alberti is a very famous example of it. I'm not sure if he was the guy, but it was one of those Italians that when he had his portrait made, he had his portrait of him sitting on a horse in armor. So he was a warrior, he was a horseman, but he was reading a book. And of course you had to be rich to be a Renaissance fan. But I mentioned him, and I've mentioned Henry VIII, and I'll mention at least one more, but I'm going to do that in the next video as I go on to the classics.